Yeah, well, good morning or afternoon to everyone, depending on what time you're watching this recording. This is the public section of the delivery board and beating crime meeting where I get to hold the chief constable accountable for delivering a police and crime plan, and also him sharing with the public some of his works in terms of how he's keeping Bedfordshire safer. You probably hear some information around over top line information around force performance, but also I have some of the questions that have been sent to me by residents, local press, as well, and some that I have come up with in terms of following my discussions and meetings with other organizations and bodies within Bedfordshire as a whole as well. So one of the first one I want to ask, Trevor, is around the plans you have for improving solve rate for crimes in Bedfordshire. What is the current rate level, and how well is the force explaining the outcomes of reported crimes to victims? So, for example, the reasons why a crime has been NFA'd, for example. Uh, my understanding from talking with some victims is that that's not always clear to them. They just get told, well, we can't proceed with this investigation any further, and that's not always made clear to the public. So I want just to recap what plans there are in place to improve crime solve rates, what the levels are, and how well the force is doing in explaining outcomes of an investigation to victims.
Yeah. Well, Festus, in relation to that, firstly, I've been really clear on my position as the chief of the force that, excuse me, I want us to be tougher on crime, and that comes with improving our performance against crime. I also want us to ensure that people are safe in the street, but also safe in their own homes. So just in terms of sort of headline figures, so as we sit here today, our solved rate is 10.4%. That's roughly the same as what it was this time last year, which is obviously a standing still position. But it has been steadily climbing this year. So in terms of our month-on-month trend, it's an improving position. I think the best performing force in the country right now is at 15%, and clearly I'd like us to be up there with the best performing forces. So just a little bit of context in there. Obviously, we want to reduce crime as well. So right now we're running at about 140 recorded crimes every day. If I compare that with 1920, and the reason I do that is that's sort of the last year where, pre-pandemic, which is what the Home Office uses as a comparison. At that point, we were running at 154 crimes a day. So you can see we've actually reduced crime, which is important, not just solving it. But if you kind of pick some areas that I think are important to residents, if I look at something like residential burglary, that's an even different position, because we've had 400 fewer house burglaries so far this year than we did the previous year. And in addition to that, in terms of actual recorded burglary, we've been improving. So we were previously about 35th in the country, which is not at the end of the 43 table where I'd like to be. We're currently we've been improving month on month. We're currently sitting at 20th in the country.
Is that in terms of recorded burglaries?
Yeah, that's in terms of recorded, and our solved rate is 10.7%, which is obviously, you can see that's higher than our sort of overall solved rate, because it's an important area to focus on. And when you look at us nationally, we were, I think in December, the best in the country at solving domestic burglary. We're currently sitting at third, but because of what we can see with performance, I'd expect us to be move into first place again, hopefully by the end of the year. Now that's compared to being sitting at around 22nd in the country, which is where we were a couple of years ago. So you can see if you look at areas that are important, I think, you know, it's a positive story. That being said, we have changed our model recently. Our frontline officers now carry a workload, so they investigate some of the things they go to. I think that's important to developing effective officers. Whenever you change a model, that's challenging, and whenever you have a high number of new starters, which we do, you know, that has an impact. But as those people become more experienced, you would expect us to improve. In terms of your you know, the question you rightly raise about victims being informed of outcomes, you're absolutely right, they should be. There isn't a single way of doing that, because sometimes it may be for a very sort of low level crime, a criminal damage, where there may be no obvious lines of inquiry. A person is told by our crime bureau over the phone that crime's being finalised, or they may be informed that they'll get a letter to confirm that. Once that's kind of been, you know, a supervisor's confirmed that there aren't any lines of inquiry. But for other cases, you know, the victims right 6 and 9, you know, say that victims should be updated, and I'd expect our staff to be keeping people informed. So if you come across, you know, I check this myself, I ring victims myself to see what their experience was like, as well as the team that we have that do that. But please share that with me, because that's if that's not being done, then we need to be clearer. And, you know, just as a result of your question today, then I will reaffirm the need to just check the consistency in relation to that.
Because obviously it probably follows reason that when we've got roughly a 10.5 average solve rate. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, when we have an average 10.5% solve rate across the board for crimes, it suggests that there is about 90% of crimes roughly that are not being solved, and there will be quite a huge volume of recorded crimes that have no outcomes, at least in the meantime. So there's got to be a huge amount of updating of victims that the officers will be doing. And I would just ask if you can just find out how well this is happening. I'm not sure if you've got any systems in place of tracking this.
Yeah, well, one of the things that happens, Festus, is when a crime is finalised, that has to be supervised by either the crime, either the crime bureau or the officer or staff member supervisor. And one of the things they should be checking is that the victim of that crime has been updated before it is finalised.
Okay, so I mean, because I'm very keen on this. 'Cause, I mean, I totally understand that not every crime can be solved for different reasons, either because the victim doesn't want to cooperate, or there are no witnesses, there's insufficient evidence, and there are many reasons why a crime can't be solved. But so that is not entirely within the control of your officers. So I get that. But what I do think is within the power of the force is that after the aftercare, so to say, and I think just making sure that people are being kept abreast of what's happening and why nothing is going to happen any further until further information is provided is made clear. So I'll be very keen before I just move on to the next question. Maybe another time when we catch up, if you can just give me any kind of an indication of how many on how well this is happening. And from my side as well, I will probably just do not a non-scientific look into what the public are experiencing in terms of when they reported a crime, if they've heard back from the force, and so on and so forth. So I think that's something that we can probably touch base on later on, because that's very much within the control of the force. So I'll appreciate us just touching base on that later on, at another time rather. Just quick before I move on to the next one, on the burglary solve rate, Trevor, can you still hear me? Because you're frozen on my screen.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
There have been a press release issued by one of the political parties, basically saying that the Home Office figures up until September last year showed Bedfordshire Police as being basically one of the worst performing forces in terms of solving burglaries. I think they reckon the force was fourth or fifth worst in the country. This obviously differs to, at least definitely differs to the current picture, but they saying that was the Home Office figures that they picked up. Can you explain why there's this discrepancy between the figures? Okay, mind you, they were comparing September last year to January, between January 22 and September 22. My argument is that, look, things have moved on, and this is public information, by the way. Can you just explain why there's this discrepancy sometimes between Home Office figures and force published figures?
There shouldn't be, Festus, because the figures I'm giving you are not ones we've generated to give a positive story. They're the ones that we share with the Home Office. They're the comparisons I can here and now tell you. We were first
in
year
December.
to date December, and we're currently sitting at third. So I haven't got that particular article. There was an interesting article which related to Christmas Day, and they'd only recorded comparisons on Christmas Day. And if you called one day where there's very low numbers, then that can give you a really
yeah. I mean,
inaccurate answer on how a particular force is addressing a threat like burglary.
And I think sometimes, obviously, you've got figures that will be fluctuating by 0.01%, and that could be the difference between you being first and fifth in some cases. And I suppose if you also compare crime figures to a lockdown year, you're going to have a bit of an outlier there as well, which I think is what they have done. But nonetheless, that's fine. Thanks for explaining that.
Can I just make one final point, Festus?
Yeah, sure, of course.
I'm less concerned about a league table. I'm more concerned about, have we had fewer victims this year than last year? And yes, we have, significantly. Have we solved more than we did in the past? Is it going in the right direction? Yes, it is. And that's the case for particularly for burglary, but for overall crime and some other things that we really, where we've got victims who are vulnerable at the other end of those crimes. So for me, it's not about league tables, it's about improving the service we provide.
And are we still, just quickly, are we still doing the tagging thing, the GPS tags?
Yes,
for burglars?
Yes.
How well is that working?
Well, it's just, we've been, one of the things we're proud of is to be rated as outstanding for managing offenders. And that tagging system is a tool, one of many tools in how you use your data to inform you of who might be engaged in offending and actually who isn't, and therefore you can focus your resources in a more precise way.
And if you can, for another time, can you just find out for me how many are currently tagged on this scheme, on the burglary scheme? I can't remember what the full title is called, but if you can let me know, that'll be good. It'll just be good to see what the outcomes have been with those individuals who are tagged and if they've been any reoffending. I know you mentioned to me sometime last year that one of those individuals who was tagged has been sent back to prison because he went to commit another burglary, which is not very clever of him, of course, but there you go. All right. The second thing I wanted to just touch base with you on is around the recruitment target for 2023. Is the force on course to meet this target or exceed it? Any update on retention, special constable numbers and productivity, and what plans are in place to recruit more specialists as well? So I'll just repeat that. Recruitment target for 2023. Are we on course to meet that target, and is it going to be exceeded? Any update on retention, special constable numbers and recruitment, and also any plans and how you're trying to improve productivity of specials as well in Bedfordshire Police?
Yeah, so there's two elements of our uplift target. There's the one which we have to do, Festus, as a force in relation to the government's, 20,000 officer uplift and our share of that. We will achieve that, and we need to achieve that because there's financial penalties. If you don't do that. We will achieve that, and for us that is 1,436 officers. However, you and I agreed a different number as a pledge to the public,
A higher number,
which was 1,456.
Yeah.
And as things stand, it's very to the wire. And I won't be able to give you confirmation until the last day of this month. We are still on track to meet that as well. But in order to do that, you know, there's
5-6.
yeah, 1,456. So the good news is we have a Police Now detective cohort of 10 officers who started today. And then we have another intake joining us on the 27th of March. Now, the people on that intake on the 27th of March are on, you know, final offers and those sorts of things. And with those that have been issued with final offers, it looks like we will achieve our target. You know, and I'm hopeful we might even be one above that. But that being said, so the good news is we definitely will achieve our bit we have to do in terms of to secure our government grant, and in terms of our collective pledge, we're on track to do that.
So we might be one above the targets, which is above the targets as well.
Possibly.
Okay.
I'm just aiming for the target at this point.
Okay, that's fine. You're more cautious than I am on these things, obviously, for obvious reasons. No, that's fine. How about the retention though? How is that going?
Yeah, so that is one of the things that concerned me was our retention. As you know, we have one of the highest proportion of of our overall officer numbers as students, and clearly, if policing isn't for you, you tend to leave in the find that out early in your service. But nevertheless, we were averaging about 12 people per month, or 12 to 10 people a month leaving the force, and that was a combination of retirements, resignations, transfers, those sorts of things. That being said, in February and March, those numbers were 5 leavers and 7 leavers respectively. And as you know, we've been putting lots and lots of focus onto understanding the reasons that people leave the force, so that we can change things, so that we don't have people leaving, because that's clearly it's a waste of resource and effort, but it's also means someone hasn't had a good experience, and we want to change that. So if we can keep the numbers to what they currently have been so far this calendar year, then that's a much healthier position to be in. So I'm not going to claim success on the back of 2 months, but it's what we're monitoring closely.
I mean, so if assuming you were able to continue with this trend of about 5 to 7 average, which is a massive difference, nearly a 50% reduction almost, in terms of attrition. If you could continue this over the year, what impact do you think that could have on an operational basis for the force, and your focus on being tough on crime in Bedfordshire?
Well, if you said, our leavers, if they were at the high end of that, so sort of 10% of your workforce, then you're having to recruit 10% to stand still.
Mm-hmm.
And when it takes an average of 2 years to train someone, that means you could have up to 280 people in training at any one time. If you half that and only have 140 people in training, it therefore must mean I've got 140 extra officers to deploy onto the streets of Bedfordshire, which is exactly what I want to be doing. So, I know you would support me in that. So that's why that retention is a really important focus for us.
Right. Okay. Well, it would be good to just keep an eye on this to see what's happening. I'll be very, very keen to see what is different now. I mean, I'm not going to take away any credit from you, Trevor, because I think the student hub, for example, is a fantastic idea. Despite the challenge that kind of creates across the business, but I think it's the right thing to do. So I fully support you on that. And I would imagine there are probably other external factors within the wider economy that is making people stay. But I also like to think that there might be other changes happening within the organization that is encouraging people to stay. But I guess you can't decide that based on 2 months worth of data. But I think probably by the autumn, it would be good to see where we are. and what's causing that
Yeah.
change?
The signal broke then slightly, but I think the gist of it was, that was. I don't think there are external factors that are affecting, people's choices. There's a lot of choices out there. There's a lot of vacancies out there. But so I think, our focus has been on identifying people earlier in their service, providing them who might be struggling and providing them with support, and just making, the culture in this force one where it really makes people want to be part of it. So that's where our focus is.
Okay.
You rightly highlight the student hub, because if you've got a lot of students, you need to kind of give them a tailored sort of pathway into becoming operationally effective, which is what that does. I think you asked me about specials as well,
Yeah.
special constabulary.
I might just be partial on this, of course. Uh, but yeah, I do care about special constables, as I know you are as well. So, what are the numbers at the moment, and in terms of productivity as well, and also in terms of plans to recruit more specials, who I think most of them you now want to get them into community policing as well.
Yeah, so our numbers are been pretty stable, and I don't have the exact number of our headcount specials in front of me here and now, but I think we were about in the mid 80s.
Yeah, so it
The
was about
last time.
85 the
Yeah,
last time that I spoke
yeah,
with Susie Carr.
yeah. However, the other factor with that is your recruitment machine. Your resources are your resources for recruitment, and we've just been talking about. It's within one or two of the target in terms of officers, and because of that, our recruitment has been almost exclusively focused on that. Albeit pleasingly, we did have a PCSO intake who went onto the streets last week, which is great news. But in terms of specials, they do provide really important service and support. And in fact, we had one special who's done more than 30 years of volunteering, getting an award
Yeah,
only the
yeah.
other day. But we have two intakes of 20
Is that
special
wrong?
constabulary officers built into the plan for 23-24. So we're hoping to bring in 40 additional special constables this coming year.
How many?
40.
40 additional specials.
Yes. So two intakes of 20 are planned.
Right. Okay. Well, I've been invited to a attestation of about 4 specials in a couple of weeks' time. So that would be nice to see. I'm sure you probably have the invite somewhere in your
Yeah.
diary as well. Okay, that's brilliant. So we're looking to get 40 more. So is that calendar year or financial year?
Financial year. So yeah.
So till March next year. Okay. And of course, if I can be of any help if you need a poster boy for your specials recruitment drive, I'll be happy to be one. I'll just put my makeup on.
That's a very competitive. I've got some very bright young things who might challenging you for that. So
Well, I know my place. I'll stick to the day job then. All right. And then the 4th question. There are 9 of these, by the way. Can I just get a quick update on the firearms capability and the renovation of the range in HQ?
yeah, so our unit's running at about 97%. So we've got about 148 officers of a total establishment of 153. So that's not a capability we can really run light in, because we do have a high number of instances where we deploy that capability as the most appropriate one to mitigate high threat situations. We do have a firing range at the site I'm currently sat at our headquarters. We are in the process of developing a new facility in a different location with our 2 forces, Hertfordshire and Cambridgeshire, that we're partnered with. But at the moment, those things take quite a bit of time, and therefore we're doing some work at our current range here just to maintain it being fit for purpose. In the meantime. That work's on track. It should be completed by April. So yeah, we're in a healthy position in terms of our establishment, and equally, our ranges will be back to full operational capability by mid-April.
By April. Okay. So in the meantime, unless it's operationally sensitive, you don't want to discuss it, and I can understand, that's fine. Where are they having their training done? If you don't want to discuss it, that's fine. I will understand.
Yeah, essentially, we've known that this maintenance was happening, so we've been able to kind of gear up the training, so we've needed it less at the moment.
Okay.
But from time to time, we do go to other licensed ranges across the country, in order to ensure our officers are accredited in certain things. So sometimes we need a bigger range than the one we have here, which there are a number across the country. And we, as you know, intend to build our own one, which is progressing another location.
So basically, the closure of the one at HQ now for renovation has been mitigated with alternative arrangements elsewhere at the moment.
Yes,
Okay.
and obviously it was pre-planned, so we were able to
Right.
load,
Okay.
front load it, so we didn't need it.
Okay. All right. Brilliant. Thanks for that. Yeah, we had. I know I had met. We'd spoken about the stab vest especially for female officers, and what is being done to try and address this issue. I know you're looking into this. Can I just get a quick update on that, please?
Yeah, so we try, my intention is we give our officers the best possible equipment that we can, because they do a tough job and they need the best kit. We've got a uniform group that's chaired by a superintendent who considers any specific issues that our officers raise, and the federation, who represent obviously the staff association that represent police officers, along with Unison, sit on that board to ensure that we do challenge ourselves to make sure we provide the best possible equipment to our officers. I'm aware of the issue you raise, but in terms of our stab vests, then they are ordered directly from the supplier based on the measurements that we provide for the officer. So
Right.
if we
Okay.
have a circumstance where one officer, so they are made to measure, is finding their equipment not comfortable, then they need to raise that, and we need to be going back
Okay.
to the supplier to say, in those circumstances that one isn't comfortable, and therefore we need to get them to redo it, and that's what we'll do.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. Right. Community policing numbers, and the operational staff and officers that are actually available on those teams. Now, I have been to quite a number of the hubs, the community policing hubs, and I'm a bit concerned, if I'm honest, that we have these numbers on paper, and not all of them are actually there yet. I understand fully that people retire, people get promoted, people go to other areas of policing, but the budgetary requirement or the budgetary ask of me, is for those 4 officers going into rural policing, and then 10 that'll be going in later on by March 2024 for the incoming financial year. Is what it is, and I have made that available. And I'm just concerned that the level of abstraction, vacancy, of an availability of officers waiting to be released to come into community, even though thankfully now we've got quite a waiting list, I hear, of officers who want to come into community policing, is quite historic actually. It's not reflected in terms of officers in those hubs. And I'm just keen to know what is being done to try and deal with this. It's not an easy one, I understand that, and there are no easy answers to this. I'm just keen to know what your thoughts are about this, if you're aware of those issues, and what plans you have to get this to the establishment level as agreed.
Yeah, so community policing is a really important capability, and I'm a genuine believer that if you don't have an effective community policing model, you'll just need to keep building reactive capabilities, because you won't be able to problem solve and kind of and instigate proper diversionary activity. You're right, community policing has become a really popular place to be because what it does is fundamentally different than what it did, in previous decades. So, it's a much harder edge now. It works really effectively with partners. It is about individuals in communities who know their communities, but they're doing some tougher edge policing stuff. So closure orders, warrants, those kinds of things. They're doing the Dallo Cares initiative that we've got, and we're looking to kind of roll that out in terms of a real problem solving focus with partners and community and third sector in other parts of the county currently. That being said, you're right. It's a difficult decision to balance where resources go, because I must have enough roads policing resources to go when people go to, in serious collisions. I must have enough people to respond to domestic abuse and other serious crimes. And so it is a constant juggle. That being said, we're currently at 56 of PCs out of a total or an aimed establishment of 67 currently. So that's 11 short of where we'd like to be across the whole of community policing. And as you say, we've got a healthy pipeline of people wanting to go in there. I just need to release them at a point when it doesn't mean that I don't have enough drivers, for example, on a patrol team, so that when there's a call for service, that there's sufficient units available to respond to those. That being said, you mentioned the rural crime team. The good news there now, we said we'd have 9 office PCs and a sergeant and a PCSO. I've currently got 8 PCs in rural crime now out of 9, plus the sergeant, plus the PCSO. So, there's only 1 vacancy in there. Similarly, the community enforcement team, that team is, got 7 individuals and a sergeant in there currently. So that's a kind of team that support our community officers by going to help them whenever they need to additional sets of hands, when they're doing perhaps enforcement activity, and they move around helping different officers. So actually the numbers, when you include the wider areas of community policing, I've got 79 PCs in there, 14 sergeants, and indeed 41 PCSOs. So there's quite a lot of resource, Festus, in that area. You're right, though, there are some vacancies. And there will be other abstractions for training and some instances sickness, but I can't say to you there will not, we will not have any, have those kind of abstractions in that area, because we have it in every single area of policing, and it would have a counterproductive effect on our ability to deliver service if I tipped that balance towards community.
So I guess a concern of mine is, so if you look at a place like Marston, Stuart B, and that area that were hit by cat converter thefts and vehicle thefts recently. And my understanding, I'm not sure, again, you don't have to go into any details in the public forum, in terms of the available resources to just provide the reassurance to residents over that week-long period where these issues were being reported. I know those weren't there. I know, as you were aware, there was Flitwick that was hit a couple of months ago with theft from vans. Obviously, these criminals, they are targeting specific areas, and they are focused on that area for a period of time. I just think that if you have, if we did have this 70 something number that you mentioned in totality, how well is the responsiveness to those kind of targeted crimes? I'm not sure. From what I'm hearing from councillors, they're just saying the response is not there.
Yeah. So, and I'm glad you asked me that question, because it's a perception issue. Yes, the community policing will know what's happening on their area. Yes, they'll be looking out for those things. But if if I use the catalytic converter thefts as an example, they're often happening into the evening. We've got dedicated operation looking at those offenders, and we will identify and find those offenders, and we're working collaboratively with other forces, because these crime series aren't unique to Bedfordshire. Criminals don't respect the
Boundaries.
borders.
Yeah.
But we have a central tasking team, which is a sizable resource, which is working late into the evenings on these operations in conjunction with road policing colleagues. We've had the National Air Service out, which we mentioned earlier, on these operations. So it's a whole blend of proactive capability that's brought to bear to tackle these offences. And it's not the community policing team who are necessarily delivering that operational effect. They're an important part, because they are the ones that understand exactly what's happening on their patch, and will always be a part of it. But it isn't as simple as if I've got a vacancy somewhere that those things won't get tackled.
Yeah. In fact, I mean, I think it's good you explained that. So there's a separate tasking team that's dealing with the investigation, that the detection of these crimes. That's great. But what I thought was very, very good, and I've got to give a shout out to the community team. I was out with them yesterday on Saturday evening in Marston Mortain at the co-op there. To basically, they were out there giving reassurance to local residents, raising awareness, and just giving advice as well. And lots of freebies with some of the UV marker pens and all kind of other advice for people, how they can keep their property and their home safe as well. So that was a really, really healthy thing to see a PCSO and a PC together, provide that kind of reassurance support to kind of overlay whatever else is being done by the tasking team. So I've got to commend them for that activity as well.
Yeah, and the PCSOs, the whole of the community team do a fantastic job, and they're getting much better at telling people what they're doing.
Yes.
PCSOs are a really important component, because they tend to move around the organisation less than officers. They're the ones that over time build up very established relationships with communities. And that knowledge, combined with working as part of a wider team, is a really good combination.
So if talking of PCSOs, Trevor, I am right that there are no plans to cut the number of PCSOs on my watch. As far as I'm aware, the budget means that we're protecting that resilience within the PCSO ranks at the level that it is. It's not being reduced. It probably would increase one or two here or there, but it's not being reduced. Is that right?
Yeah, there's no plans to recruit PCSO numbers. We've got a few vacancies.
You mean to reduce, not recruit, to reduce?
Yeah, no. We at the moment we are maintaining our establishment. We've gone below that, but simply because some have chosen to join as an officer, and that's a good thing, because they'll probably be really effective officers. But the plan for the coming year is we intend to recruit a further 24 PCSOs to bring us to ensure we maintain at our establishment strength of 53 PCSOs.
I mean, I think I know some might not be very happy about this, because obviously a PCSO is they're worth their weight in gold in terms of the level of local knowledge they have. But I'd rather a PCSO become a PC in Bedfordshire Police area than to lose them entirely from policing. So
and they'll be more effective before it as well, as a once, because of their experience.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. That is fine. Now, I would just like a brief update, please, on the student hub, which we spoke about briefly a minute ago. I mean, there have been some really positive outcomes from this, and I've met some of the officers in the student hub who actually quite like it there. And for some of the trainers the tutors in the student hub, again, they are quite they like this current arrangement more than the previous one, because the workload is not as heavy, but the level of in-depth support they can give to the student officers is just a lot more. Have there been any learnings so far from the current student hub? What is going well, and what are you planning to tweak in the early stages as this moves on?
I'm pleased to say the student hub wasn't just sort of brought into place quickly. It was thought through, and there was a lot of planning in terms of the resources, how it was going to work. So the idea of people doing their training within a kind of classroom environment, and then rather than when they're ready to go onto the streets, going straight onto a team that's got really high workload, and you might not get colleagues having the time to kind of explain things in great detail. The student hub means that they do go out there, they do respond to calls of service and do proactive patrols. And indeed, one of the pleasing things to see is pretty much every day in both of our, in Bedford and Luton, you have those students with their experienced tutors on foot patrol, which is a really positive. So they're doing proactive, high visibility work as well. But when they respond to an incident, they get the time to then go through how to respond to that really effectively, debrief it, and maximize their learning so that they're effectively got a better experience of being a new officer in our force. In terms of the learning at the moment, it seems to be going very well. They've got a good span of hours. They work up until midnight, so they support with the nighttime economy and those sorts of things. And certainly at the moment, it seems to be working very well. And I personally feel that that's given us a much, that is probably the biggest difference in the reduction in levers. Can't actually say that yet because of how long it's been operating, but that's my gut sense as we sit here and there.
I mean, obviously, like I said, probably nearer the autumn, be able to have a closer look at this, and you probably be able to do your own deep dive into that function to see what is going well in it. Because I mean, if that is what is having an impact on the retention rate, where it's kind of almost doubled the retention rate and half the attrition rate, that is quite spectacular. If that can be maintained from 12 or 13 a month to 5 to 7, I mean, that is extraordinary.
Well, that links us back to our last conversation on carrying gaps in different units. We talked about community.
Yeah.
If we reduce that makes it much easier for me in time to then populate these teams, and in some instances look where we might increase numbers rather than maintain them.
So because some of the officers that are going into the student hub are coming out of community and other areas because they're some of your more experienced officers, right?
That's right. Yeah. That's the difficult bit that we have to do.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you're the chief constable, not me, because that's a difficult one. So the next question I want to ask you, Trevor, is one that was sent to me by a local journalist, and it's around Chinese manufactured equipment in policing. And if there are any risks that you envision with this, if there are, how those are being mitigated, and if Bedfordshire Police has got any concerns around Chinese manufactured products being used in policing.
Yeah, so we've done an audit on this to kind of address any concerns that we have, and indeed, I was involved personally with my leadership team in a Triforce exercise on Friday morning last week to look at potential cyber threats to our organisation, and to make sure that our understanding and our efforts in that are at the level they should be. In relation to the specific question on Chinese sort of technology, we did some work into this. We've identified one piece of kit that I won't name the manufacturer, but I have the manufacturer in front of me, that we've looked at, and in relation to how we use that, we've ensured that it is not, if you like, connected to the internet, essentially, so so that it can't be passing technology, or there's no risk of any kind of data loss or or anything of that nature. So it's very much an isolated system that performs a task. So at the moment, it's good that we get asked those questions, but we have done an audit and we don't have a concern in relation to a security risk from that threat vector.
And are you picking up this concern? Obviously, you've got quite a big national role around SOC, which is serious organized crime. Are you picking up this kind of concerns from any of your colleagues as well, or from government, from the Home Office?
Yes, I mean, as a system, UK law enforcement, along with its intelligence partners, does take sort of state actors and those kind of threats very seriously. It's as part of the national strategic assessment, and so it is constantly a focus, and and it does have the right level of scrutiny, I would say, nationally.
Right. Good. If I can just jump back briefly, and it's more of a thought. You don't have to respond to this. Given the fact that you've got all these really wonderful new student officers in the student hub who are helping out with foot patrols in Luton and Bedford, where you've got the student hubs, could you just consider as sometime in the future, as the availability emerges, that some of those student officers, as and when possible, could also maybe do foot patrols in central Bedfordshire area?
Yeah,
just for consideration.
So at the moment, we recognise that this has provided a boost, if you like, to the two big town centres.
Yeah.
And in many cases, for those areas, they were very much, I know, welcome that, and so it was effectively provided high visibility.
And I have seen that as well. If I'm honest with you, from talking with the inspectors in those areas, they have seen that it has been helpful. Yes.
Yeah. So and on that basis, when we come to look at, as we get more resources who become, if you like, independent deployable assets, then we'll recognise that in terms of where we look to bolster resources. And I do recognise that Central Beds has a number of significant sized market towns that have demand of their own, and we'll be constantly looking at how we improve visibility there. So this isn't sort of that they aren't not considered in that way. It's just that's where I've needed to base the student hubs.
Yeah, and I understand, and I think for those who are watching this important, they kind of realize that there's a separation of powers between a police and crime commissioner and a chief constable. The chief has got operational responsibility for policing and is completely independent. I mean, I can give my opinions in some areas, and he can tell me exactly where to go. But the chief has got. Can you just explain to the public, whilst we're on this issue of this independence in terms of the role of the PCC and the chief on operational issues, how you decide where to put the resources that you have, given the fact that everything can't be a priority?
You're absolutely right. So we have a control strategy priority, which looks at those crimes that are causing the most harm to victims. But clearly, within our policing model, we commit, for example, more than the national average to community policing. So community policing is a priority of ours, and and I want us to really step up in problem solving. But we have a number of high harm crimes that we need to make a response to. So we, essentially, I will look at that control strategy along with the demand that's coming in from various places, and we will position our deployable assets in a way that they can have the most impact on the reactive demand, but also that when we come to focusing our proactivity and our problem solving, we do it in a way that seeks to reduce demand, because we would both want us to not have the crime in the first place and to be tough on drivers of crime. And serious and organized crime, drug offences, those drug trafficking, they are underpin a lot of other criminal activity and demand and exploitation, and therefore there will be a focus on those efforts as well.
And how difficult is it for you to kind of get a balance in meeting all these demands? Because you hear from me, you hear from the councillors, you hear from everyone around community policing, around antisocial behaviour, graffiti and parks and kids damaging play areas, to hair coursing, to domestic abuse, to serious violent crimes, to stabbings, to shootings. The whole gamut of issues are on your desk. How difficult is it balancing all of these demands?
Well, Festus, that is my job to balance those demands, but it's our collective effort to kind of make the case that we actually could do with some more funding, because that would always make that easier if we had more resources. That being said, part of the things you've just said is policing's job to tackle, but also it's something we do in partnership with local authority, with other service providers, and with the community themselves. So by having good communication with our communities, and another thing I think we are getting better at, and we need to continue to get better at, is actually telling the public what we're doing, because some of the things that are, amazing operational delivery that happens, maybe in the middle of the night, doesn't make the headlines when some other things do, and we need to be really, pushing that.
And then I think a lot. Sorry, go on, go ahead.
No, so very much it is, and that's why there's a lot of change in policing, because the demand doesn't stay the same.
Yeah.
And that's why we have to constantly look at that and kind of make sure we are future fit, approved for the future. And that's why, things like working really effectively with, for example, the NHS, because that we often responding to people in crisis, ensuring that our resources aren't being diverted to things they shouldn't be doing. And when we take someone to hospital who doesn't need the police, for example, that we can actually hand them over if we have done that, rather than an ambulance, and leave. Because all of those margins over time make a big difference.
And speaking on this, actually, you meant about the NHS and the mental health job that police officers are going into. Have we seen any other cases of this happening recently?
Sorry, Festus, can you just explain? It wasn't a great signal.
Yeah, I was saying, in terms of the you mentioned on police officers still dealing with mental health crisis jobs. Are we still seeing cases of this happening in Bedfordshire Police?
Yeah, so there was a night, or a 24-hour period last week, I think it was Thursday, where I saw on our kind of a log of significant incidents that you'd expect us to monitor on a daily basis. There were 7 separate situations where our officers were made aware and responded to instances where people were considering, we believe they were going to take their own lives, and therefore we directly responded in order to save lives. And sadly, in one instance, someone had already done that before we had already done that. So that's significant. 7 instances like that, where these individuals clearly, the police will always respond in order to save life, as that's our first and foremost duty. But for individuals to be in that position in the first place, it's clearly got to a significant point where one would hope that other services may have been able to provide intervention before that, because it's troubling when you see that level of demand from people in mental health crisis, on the service that we currently see. And I know there is a good focus on this. It's recognised nationally, and I know there's an investment in that, but it will take time. But we weren't seeing demand of that nature several years ago. It's definitely a rising tide that policing is responding to more and more, and not uniquely in Bedfordshire, but we're certainly seeing it here.
And in those 7 cases, did the ambulance turn up in any of those cases? Did the police have to transport the individuals, apart from the person who sadly died from suicide, of course? Did the police have to take the person to A&E in any of these cases at all?
Yeah, so in those cases, and not in all, and I don't have the exact figure in front of me here and now, because I picked that particular day off the top of my head, as it stayed with me. However, what I do know is in a number of those cases, we did take people.
But why are police officers transporting mental health patients? I mean, the back of a police car is not where any mental health patient in Bedfordshire should be.
No, and that's the system challenge. But ultimately, if we are there, we know that person needs that help.
Yeah.
Then when
Yeah.
we've got a choice, we can wait where we are, or we can try and get them to a place
Yeah.
safe as quickly as possible. And that's the challenge for you and I, in terms of, you know, influencing how the system responds to people, so they get the right care for the right person by the right agency. And that's the current conversation, you know, with health, because they're under huge pressures, but that we are not the right person or the right agency to be
I guess my
responding.
concern, to put it bluntly, and I know that you're working with Felicity from the ICB Integrated Care Board on this. My concern, Trevor, is that at some point we're going to hear a news of a person in crisis at the back of a police car, um, um, dying, or something really, really bad happening to them in the back of a police car. And that only creates another level of uh, questions to be asked. Or it could be a case where a police officer is attacked while they're driving on blue lights to A&E, and it causes all kinds of chaos and risk to the public as well. I am very, very worried about this happening. I guess it's born out of my own personal experience, having done this as well, but when I was a special here. But the fact this is still happening, I'm finding it very, very troubling. And I really do hope, Trevor, that you will be able to continue with your work with Felicity to highlight this issue, because we do not want this to happen, and it's only going to be a matter of time until both the NHS and the ambulance service gets their act together on this. It's only a matter of time.
Yeah, so I think our officers and staff are doing an amazing job in difficult circumstances.
Yep. Yep.
Every single day. This isn't, you know, that wasn't a one-off. Every single day. And yeah, I recognise that other agencies are under pressure, but you're right, and I totally agree with you. I share those concerns, which is why there needs to be a change in how we operate, and if that, you know, as the system operates, so that we can, in circumstances at the very least where we have had to convey someone to a medical facility, kind of hand them over quickly, so we can get our resources back into our primary mission. And in due course, it be, you know, there's clearly individuals out there in the community who need more support so that they don't end up in crisis in those situations. It's a wider system challenge, but what we can do is, you know, highlight this issue to influence change.
And well, look, I look forward to get some more updates from you on your work with the ambulance service as well as the NHS. So I've got two more questions to ask you, and that'll be it for now. One is around the mobile police office vehicles, which I hear that apparently the force are getting rid of. I think they are an excellent visual presence in our community, especially in the market towns and rural areas where they're often used by PCSOs and community officers. And I have seen this out in Silso, I've seen this out in Leighton Buzzard, I've seen this out in Biggleswade, and most recently I think it was in Henlow. I can remember, yeah, I think it was in Henlow where I last saw it, in Clifton, sorry, in Clifton. Can you consider not selling any more of these, get rid of any more of these? If they are going to be gotten rid of, what plans are in place to replace these vehicles? And the last question that I have for you is around the Casey review and how the force is preparing itself ahead of the findings, which I would imagine you've had an insight into what its content is going to be. I'm not sure if it's going to be anything particularly new that we don't know of beforehand. And just get updates from you on what the force is doing to make sure that we don't have any of these things highlighted in the Met happening in Bedfordshire Police.
Wow. So that last question combines our police fleet with probably one of the biggest challenging for policing in modern times. So quickly, Festus, on the mobile police vans. So That's why it's always good to check these things. You're right, we did have three are due for replacement. Due to operational demand, different types of vans were prioritised, ones that, you know, convey prisoners because of the operational need. That being said, there is no plan to reduce that capability. As you rightly say, I agree with you. It provides us an ability to say we're going to be at this location at this time and have a suitable facility for the public to come and speak to our officers and staff. So we currently have 2 new vehicles waiting to arrive. So they will be replacing the ones that are being decommissioned because they are at that stage of their life.
Yep.
So essentially, there is no change.
So we're going to have that. So we're going to keep that one mobile police office vehicle then.
No, we will have 3 in total.
Oh, okay.
It's just that 2 need to kind of go out of service, and you know there's some challenges with getting new vehicles from suppliers currently for all vehicles, and the public will know that. But they will come online in the near future.
Excellent. So we're going to have 3 mobile police office vehicles eventually.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
excellent.
In terms of the Casey review, and you know, I'm sure we will discuss that further this week when because I understand that tomorrow there will be more kind of news in relation to this. You know, that undoubtedly will say not good things, and obviously whilst it focuses on the Metropolitan Police, the issues that will be highlighted in that, you know, they will be implications for wider policing. And all I would say really is reiterate the, you know, the conversation that we've had previously, and I know I've shared my correspondence with you that in relation to this, but you know, this simply must undoubtedly increases our resolve to tackle the issues that it being, you know, and you know, again, I'll just, while we're here and now, we've been talking about amazing work that our people have done, but in, you know, in this context, having one person in our ranks who the public may be fearful of is responding to them, who doesn't have the values that we expect in our organisation, is one too many. And I'm absolutely resolved to ensuring that we double down our efforts in relation to the culture of the organisation, and that anyone who shouldn't be in our force is identified and removed, you know, swiftly. And all I would say is I'm immensely proud of some of of when we have had problems ourselves here in Bedfordshire, that we've had our upstanders amongst our officers and staff who called that out. And I'm kind of, you know, working hard here, investing in leadership at every level to ensure that we have a culture where we're, you know, really vigilant and resistant to anyone who undermines the work that's being done here, and that is called out as a result of upstanders rather than bystanders, if that provides you some reassurance.
Well, it does. It does. And I just hope that we do not see any kind of defensiveness from policing when this Casey review is published fully. It's just going to add to a litany of other reviews and reports into police conduct, which it leaves much to be desired from the public. And I guess my final challenge to you, Trevor, is like at the very beginning, which is, you know, how well do you have your finger on the pulse of what is happening in Bedfordshire Police? And I guess as Chief Constable, that is your responsibility to be able to deal with that. And how you decide to keep your finger on the pulse of the business is yours to determine. And I just hope that you are doing everything you can to really have a feel for what is happening within your organization.
Yeah. And all I would say is, to be absolutely clear to the public listening to this, the culture of our organisation is actually my number one priority. And I don't need that report coming out tomorrow to kind of make that the number one priority, because it already is, and it already has been, and it was under the previous chief. And so, therefore, we are quite a long way down the road here to really identifying what, and making happen what needs to be done. And we've seen some real positive changes as a result of it. So all I would say is, I'm not saying that there's no issue in Bedfordshire, and tomorrow undoubtedly will be a difficult day. But the public rightly expect the highest standards, and I expect them to have that. So I don't need, necessarily to wait for tomorrow to start work. It's already happening and has been happening for some time and is making real positive change here.
Excellent. Well, look, thank you very much for your time today, Trevor, and I do appreciate your answers and your response to all these questions. Yeah, keep up the good work, and we will keep in touch of course, as we always are.
Absolutely. And thank you very much.
Take care now. Bye bye.
Take care.